In this video, we're going to talk about abstract art, what it is, how it developed, and why there's a little bit more to it than meets the eye. Hey y'all, I'm Drake and this is Drake Makes Art. So, I think abstract art kind of gets a bad rep among normal people. Like if you're not an art historian and you don't know what was going on in the art world as modern abstract art was developing, I think it's very easy to dismiss it as just bad art. You know, like I've heard people say, my 5-year-old could scribble like that. Or, you know, I could paint that. That's a real simple painting. Why is that so famous? I could do that. And so what I want to do with this video is kind of provide a little like mini tour of abstract art movements that have happened over the past 160-ish years. That's a long time. I'm not going to get to everything. There have been a lot of little groups who have been stepping along the way as we've developed. But I do want to hit the highlights. And so to do that, I'm actually going to be painting on these bookmarks. And each bookmark will have a representation of a different art movement in the development of modern abstract art. So let's get started. If we wanted to be super technical and specific about the beginnings of abstract art, we could start all the way back with prehistoric cave paintings, which were often abstract depictions. I mean, you can tell that these are rhinoceroses, but that's not what a rhinoceros actually looks like. However, when we think of abstract art in the contemporary sense, we're often thinking about stuff like this. So how do we get from here to here? We can trace the roots of modern abstract art to a late 19th century cultural movement you've probably heard of, but never associated with abstract art: Impressionism. The Impressionists took the first steps away from figurative art in that they sought to capture impressions in their paintings, instead of perfecting every little detail. They focused on light and subjective experience, and would often paint the same scenes over and over again at different times of day and different times of the year, because with Impressionism, it was the subjective moment, not the objective reality of the scene, that was important. Keeping this in mind, I've decided this first bookmark will be an impression of this mechanical pencil. It's a rather simple shape that will be easy to paint multiple times, so you'll really be able to get a feel for how each of these art styles are different based on the different interpretations of the same basic subject. Now, this piece was hard for me. I have a tendency to lean towards perfectionism sometimes, but the entire point of Impressionism is to not be detailed, so I focused on capturing the play of light on the pencil. It's a semi-transparent cylinder with darker edges and a highlight in the center. Since I was trying to just capture an impression, the mechanisms inside turned to gray smudges, as did the writing on the clip. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this one, even if it was outside my comfort zone. If the Impressionists sought to capture a moment of time, the Expressionists wanted to tell you how they felt about that moment. Expressionism was all about how the artist's emotions influence their perceptions of what is real, and Expressionist paintings would often distort their subjects to convey these emotional realities. Artists like Edvard Munch and Franz Marc used strong, contrasting colors to convey their angst at the turn of the 20th century, a time when the world was changing rapidly, much like today. So for this second piece, I had to think not just about what the pencil looked like, but what it meant to me. How did the pencil make me feel? As silly as it may sound to evaluate your feelings around something as simple as a pencil, I actually really enjoyed the exercise. I'm a creator. I create art, I write stories, I make YouTube videos. So for me, a pencil isn't just something you use to make marks on paper. It's a vehicle for creation. So for this painting, I decided to express that by first of all heightening the contrast between the highlights and the shadows. I gave the pencil a strong, bright highlight right in the center, almost as if there was a comet inside. Then I painted the entire background with a medium purple to represent darkness. Next, I painted a white hot lightning bolt bursting from the tip of the pencil, designed to suggest the shape of a sword because, the pen is mightier than the sword. I finished out the background and decided to leave the eraser off the end of the pencil because once we send our words and our art out into the world, there's really no taking it back. The next movement we need to examine is one of the most famous movements in recent history. Cubism. Cubism was a major leap towards what we now think of as abstract art, primarily because it intentionally sought to break reality down into simple shapes like circles, squares, and rectangles. Where earlier artists tried to preserve three-dimensional form, cubists like Pablo Picasso would express the same object from multiple perspectives, all squished flat on the canvas. This rejection of traditional artistic tools like perspective led to fragmented images abstracted from the objects they were supposed to represent. So if you take a cylinder like this pencil and break it down into its composite shapes, you get a rectangle and a circle. If you take a cone, like the one at the tip of this pencil, and lay it on its side, you get a triangle. So this piece will be composed entirely of rectangles, circles, and triangles. I'm interested to know if you think this piece still looks like a pencil, or if you think we're too far removed from reality at this point. Let me know in the comments below. In parallel with Cubism, another form of abstract painting was developing in the Netherlands. The style, or neoplasticism, advocated for pure abstraction, and artists often worked with nothing but straight lines in black, white, and primary colors. I feel like this painting by Piet Mondrian is one I've heard criticized as something a 4-year-old could make, but I'd like to point out that he painted this with brushes and oil paints, and making such hard-edged lines is no easy task with those media. For this next bookmark, I decided to channel my inner Mondrian, so I didn't need this pencil anymore. Mondrian's pieces weren't representational at all, and he called them compositions rather than naming them after objects or ideas. He believed that art should have no relation to reality, and his work sought to distill pure, universal aesthetics. Well, We've reached the point in the video where I can't use images of any of the most famous paintings from the movements we're going to talk about because they're still under copyright. However, when you think of abstract art, you're probably thinking of abstract expressionism, or as it was known in the 1950s, action painting. For artists in this movement, the painting wasn't the art. The act of creating the painting was the art. The finished canvas was simply a record of the act of creation, like when you buy something and get a receipt as a record of that transaction. Artists like Jackson Pollock were famous for their drip paintings, where they would splatter paint all over large canvases laid out on the floor. For this piece, I'll be following in Jackson Pollock's footsteps and splattering paint all over this bookmark. Since I'm using watercolor instead of the enamel paints Pollock used, I'm going to have to get creative with my technique. But that's the whole point of this movement. The actions are what count. The next artistic movement in abstract art was the development of color field painting. Artists like Mark Rothko would paint their canvases with large monochromatic swaths of color, or layer several colors on top of each other to create blocks of color that were meant to inspire a spiritual experience in their viewers, even as secularism was on the rise in the culture at large. For this next bookmark, I've decided to use wet-on-wet techniques to allow the color to flow freely around the paper. I've also layered several coats of different complementary colors, hoping to evoke the simplicity of Rothko's color fields. The last movement we'll be studying today is the op art, or optical art movement. Artists in this movement sought to push the limits of what our eyes could perceive, and played with optical illusions in both monochromatic and bold expressive color palettes. Influential artists in this movement include Victor Vasarely and Bridget Riley, who played with perspective and color to create paintings that trick your eyes into seeing things that aren't really there. For this bookmark, I've decided to keep things simple and rely on my pens to create a checkerboard illusion. Chessboards were an important element in Vasarely's early work, and Riley has relied on simple black and white line compositions in several of her most famous paintings. And here they are. These are the finished bookmarks. Let me know in the comments which one is your favorite. Also, if you make abstract art, I want to see it. Tag me on Instagram at Drake_makes_art. If you want to peek behind the scenes and see more of my creative process, you can follow me on Facebook at DrakeMakesArt. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time when we make something new.